beamy Dean, just a regular guy, not a supermodel, not a CEO, just a dude with a decent job in IT, a small apartment, and a life that felt pretty sorted out. Had my hobbies, my circle of friends. Everything was baseline comfortable. And for about 2 years, the best part of that life was my girlfriend Nomi. When we met, she was awesome, witty, funny, had this laugh that could make you forget a bad day. Instantly, we just clicked. You know? No drama, no games, just two people who genuinely enjoyed being around each other. Our whole relationship was built on that easy, comfortable vibe. We could spend a whole weekend just lounging around, watching old movies, cooking, and it felt like the best vacation ever. The affection was the same way, completely natural. A random hug while I was doing the dishes, her resting her head on my shoulder while we read on the couch, me brushing her hair back from her face without thinking. It was the small stuff, the unspoken language of a couple that's in sync. We didn't need to ask. We just knew it was trust. It was intimacy. It was normal. It was good then. Something started to shift. It was gradual at first, barely noticeable. She started spending more and more time on certain corners of the internet. Her feed became a wall of infographics and angry posts. She got into these online groups with some new friends I never met. The language started to change suddenly. Everything was about deconstructing this and unpacking, that our casual conversations started to feel like pop quizzes on social theory. She'd bring up things like toxic masculinity. And, at first, I engaged with it. Sure, I get it, some guys are jerks. No one's arguing that I tried to be the supportive boyfriend. Listened to her points. Nod along, figured it was just a new interest. Like when she got really into pottery for a month. But it wasn't a phase. It was becoming her entire personality. She started analyzing everything I did through this new lens. If I held a door open for her, it was a subconscious expression of patriarchal condescension. If I offered to carry the heavy groceries, I was infantilizing her and denying her agency. If I was quiet after a long day at work, I wasn't just tired. I was emotionally withdrawn and perpetuating the stereotype of the uncommunicative male. It was exhausting. I felt like I was constantly walking on eggshells, my every move being scrutinized for some hidden, sinister meaning. The easy, natural flow between us was gone, replaced by this tense, analytical atmosphere. I remember telling my best friend, Leaf, about it over a beer. I was trying to make light of it. But he just looked at me with a dead serious expression. He told me it sounded like she was looking for problems that didn't exist. He said she wasn't seeing me, Dean, anymore. She was seeing a collection of theoretical flaws she'd read about online. I defended her, of course, told him she was just passionate and trying to make the world a better place. He just shrugged and said, "All right, man, just don't let her try to fix you into someone you're not." I should have listened. The real turning point came a few weeks later. She sat me down for what she called a relationship progress meeting. That should have been my first red flag. She had a clipboard and a pen. A damn clipboard. She started talking in this calm, almost corporate voice about how she'd been doing a lot of thinking. She explained that while she loved me, she felt our relationship needed to be ethically realigned, to be truly progressive, and built on a foundation of enthusiastic consent. My brain just kind of buffered at that. I told her I thought we already had that we were always good at communicating. She gave me this patient, slightly condescending smile, the kind of smile you give a child who just doesn't get it. Yet, she explained that nonverbal cues are a patriarchal construct, and that true consent had to be explicit, affirmative, and documented. I literally blinked at her. Documented? That's when she slid a piece of paper across the coffee table. It was a document she'd designed and printed out at the top. In a clean, sans serif font, it read, "Affection and physical intimacy consent form." My jaw must have hit the floor. It looked like something you'd get at the DMV. There were lines for date, time, and signatures. And then there were checkboxes, a whole list of them: hand-holding, duration, hug, type, A, platonic/supportive, B, romantic, kiss, location, A, cheek, B, forehead, C, lips, closed mouth, D, lips, open mouth, cuddling, position, A, spooning, B, face-to-face. I just stared at it, speechless. I thought it was a joke, a really weird, elaborate prank. I started to laugh, expecting her to join in. She didn't. Her expression was completely serious. She told me that from now on, before any physical affection, I would need to present a form for her to review and sign. This, she said, would eliminate any ambiguity and ensure our interactions were always 100% consensual and respectful. I tried to reason with her. I told her this was insane, that you can't bureaucratize a relationship. I explained that our connection was built on spontaneity and trust, not paperwork. I asked her if she really thought I was the kind of guy who would ever do something she wasn't comfortable with. She replied that it wasn't about me. Personally, it was about dismantling the systemic power imbalances inherent in heteronormative relationships. It was like talking to a textbook. The person I knew, the warm, funny Nomi, was gone, replaced by this cold ideologue. I felt a knot forming in my stomach. This wasn't about us anymore. This was about her proving a point to some invisible audience online. I was no longer her boyfriend. I was a variable in her social experiment. But I was in love with her, or at least with the memory of who she used to be. So, like an idiot, I agreed to try it. I thought, maybe if I play along for a week, she'll see how ridiculous it is and drop it. That was my second massive mistake the next morning. The new reality hit me like a ton of bricks. I was about to leave for work. And, out of pure muscle memory, I leaned in to give her a quick kiss goodbye. She flinched back like I'd just tried to brand her with a hot iron. Her eyes darted towards the coffee table where the stack of freshly printed forms sat. "Dean," she said, her voice laced with disappointment. "We talked about this. The protocol. The protocol." I felt like an employee who'd forgotten to clock in. I sighed, picked up a form and a pen. My hand hovered over the checkboxes. I felt like the stupidest man on the planet. I ticked the box for kiss, location, A, cheek. I signed my name, pushed the paper over to her. She reviewed it, nodded gravely, as if she were approving a corporate merger, and signed her name. Then she turned her cheek to me. I gave her the most sterile, passionless peck on the cheek in human history. It felt transactional, like I was getting a receipt for a purchase. All the warmth, all the simple affection of a goodbye kiss was just gone. I walked out of the apartment that day feeling hollow. The absurdity of it all just kept escalating that weekend. We decided to go for a walk in the park. It was a nice day, and for a moment, it felt like old times instinctively. I reached for her hand. She pulled it away immediately. "Did you bring a form?" she asked, completely deadpan. I had not brought a form because I was a normal human being going for a walk, not a paralegal heading to a deposition. So we walked side by side, with a careful foot of space between us, like two strangers who happened to be going in the same direction. I could feel people looking at us, this weird, disconnected couple. The silence between us was heavy with unspoken rules. Later that night, we were watching a movie on the couch. It was a thriller, and a jump scare made her yelp. My arm went around her automatically, a protective, comforting gesture. She stiffened instantly. "Dean," she whispered, her voice tight. "Consent." I retracted my arm like it was on fire. "Sorry," I mumbled. "It was just a reflex." "Reflexes are built on conditioning," she replied, not taking her eyes off the screen. "We need to recondition ours to be more mindful." I spent the rest of the movie sitting perfectly still, my hands clasped in my lap. I wasn't even watching the film anymore. I was just acutely aware of the space between us, this dead zone where affection used to live. I felt like I was being trained, like a dog being taught not to jump on the furniture. Every natural impulse I had was now wrong, a transgression that needed to be corrected. My own home was starting to feel like a minefield. I met up with Leaf again a few days later. I told him everything: the forms, the protocol, the incident in the park I was expecting, and I told you so. But he just listened patiently when I was done. He was quiet for a long time. Then he looked me right in the eye and said, "She's not in a relationship with you anymore, Dean. She's in a relationship with her ideology. You're just a prop." He explained that this wasn't about safety or respect. It was about control. It was a power play dressed up in academic language. She had created a system where she held all the cards. She was the one who could grant or deny affection, and I was the one who had to beg for it. In writing, it was a constant low-grade humiliation, designed to make me feel like I was always in the wrong, always one step away from being a problem. Every word he said hit home. It was the truth. I didn't want to admit to myself, but still, a part of me clung to hope. I remembered the Nomi from before, the one who would grab my hand just because, the one whose laugh was the best sound in the world. I thought maybe, just maybe, I could get her back, so I doubled down on my attempt to comply. I started carrying a few blank forms in my wallet, just in case I tried to make a joke out of it. I'd present a form with a flourish, like a waiter presenting the wine list. "Madam," I'd say in a goofy accent, "might I petition for a brief hand-holding session?" She never cracked a smile. She would just take the form, review it with the seriousness of a bomb disposal expert, and sign. The system was not a game to her. It was gospel. It got worse. She bought a 3-ring binder and a label maker. The binder was labeled Consent Archive. She started filing away all the signed forms. Organized by date, our relationship now had a paper trail. One evening, I came home to find her at the kitchen table, designing new, more detailed forms on her laptop. She told me the original form was too simplistic and lacked nuance. She had created appendices, Appendix A, cuddling specifics. This one had diagrams showing acceptable positions and required you to specify the duration in 5-minute increments. Appendix B, emotional support contact. This was for situations where one of us was upset. It had a clause stating that physical comfort does not imply an endorsement of the emotional state's validity. I felt a cold dread wash over me. This wasn't a temporary phase. This was her life's new project. She was building a fortress of bureaucracy around her heart, and I was on the outside. The natural give and take of a relationship was being replaced by a sterile, one-way process of applications and approvals. I was no longer an equal partner. I was a petitioner, an applicant. My desire for her was something that had to be requested, vetted, and authorized. The romance was being systematically dismantled, piece by piece, form by form. I started to feel a strange detachment, the constant self-monitoring, the fear of making a procedural error was exhausting, so I just started to stop. I stopped initiating. It was easier than going through the paperwork. It was less humiliating than having my natural affection be subject to review if I wanted to hug her. The thought would pop into my head, followed immediately by an image of the forms and the binder and the whole ridiculous process, and the desire would just die. It was like a switch being flipped off in my brain. The warmth I felt for her was being chipped away with every signed paper, every procedural correction. The space between us on the couch grew wider. The casual touches disappeared completely. Our apartment, which used to be filled with laughter and easy intimacy, became quiet and still. We were turning into roommates, polite but distant. She didn't seem to notice, or if she did, she seemed to approve one afternoon. She proudly told me that our relationship was now a model of ethical interaction. She said she'd been telling her online friends about our system, and they were all so impressed. They saw her as a pioneer, a trailblazer in the world of progressive relationships. Hearing that made me feel sick. So our relationship was now just content for her online friends, a case study for her ideology. It confirmed everything Leif had said. I wasn't a person to her anymore. I was a success story. The final nail in the coffin was yet to come, but the wood was already in place, the hammer already raised. I remember one specific evening vividly. We were watching a movie again, and it was a genuinely funny one. I laughed at a joke, a real deep belly laugh. I looked over at her, wanting to share the moment, to see her laughing too. She was smiling, but it was a small, tight smile. Then she looked at me, and her expression changed. She said, "It's interesting how male-coded humor often relies on aggression or schadenfreude." And just like that, the moment was dead. I wasn't just laughing. I was performing masculinity. I couldn't even share a simple laugh with her without it being put under a microscope and dissected for problematic elements. I realized then that I couldn't do anything right. Every single thing I did was filtered through her ideological lens and found wanting. I felt an immense sense of fatigue, a bone-deep weariness. I wasn't just tired of the forms, I was tired of being judged, constantly, for just existing. I was tired of my love being treated like a problem to be managed a few days after that. The thing that would break me finally happened. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a huge fight. It was something quiet, something small. But it was the end. I came home from work, and I could hear her crying from the bedroom, not just crying, but sobbing. The kind of deep, painful sobs that shake a person's whole body. I found out later she'd had a massive fight with her family over something trivial, but in that moment all I knew was that the woman I loved was in pain, and every instinct in my body, every fiber of my being, screamed at me to go to her, to hold her, to tell her it would be okay. It was the most natural, human impulse in the world to comfort someone you care about. I walked to the bedroom door, my heart aching for her. This was it, I thought. A real moment of human vulnerability. Surely the rules don't apply now. Surely comfort comes before protocol. I stood there for a second, just outside the bedroom door. I could hear her choked sobs, raw and unfiltered. Part of my brain, the old part, the boyfriend part, was screaming at me, "Go to her." It was a simple, primal command. Comfort her. That's your job. That's what a good man does. So I pushed the door open. She was curled up on the bed, face buried in a pillow, her whole body shaking. She looked small and incredibly vulnerable. I walked over, my movements slow, and sat on the edge of the bed. I reached out, my hand hovering over her back, about to place it there in a gesture of support. It was pure instinct. And then her crying hitched. She must have heard me come in. She rolled over slowly, her face a mess of tears and smudged makeup. She looked at my outstretched hand, and for a fleeting second, I saw a flicker of need in her eyes. I thought, this is it. A moment of pure human connection will break this stupid spell. I was wrong, so horribly, profoundly wrong. Her eyes, still wet with tears, widened in what looked like panic. Her hand shot out, not to take mine, but to stop it midair. "Wait," she gasped, her voice thick with crying. The protocol." I froze. My hand remained hovering in the space between us. I stared at her, unable to process what I was hearing. She was actively sobbing, her heart clearly broken about something, and her first thought was paperwork. She pushed herself up, still crying, and her eyes scanned the room frantically. I think I have a pre-filled emotional support form in my purse," she stammered out between sobs. And that was it. That was the sound of something inside me shattering into a million irreparable pieces. It wasn't a loud, angry explosion. It was a quiet, cold, and final snap. The part of my brain that loved her, that ached for her, that saw her as my partner, just went dark. It was like a switch had been flipped, a circuit breaker thrown. All the warmth, the affection, the desperate hope that I could get the old Nomi back. It all vanished. In its place was a profound, chilling, and utterly peaceful emptiness. I slowly lowered my hand. I looked at this crying woman on the bed, fumbling through her bag for the right piece of paper to authorize a hug, and I felt nothing. Not anger, not pity, not sadness, just nothing. It was like looking at a stranger, a very strange, very sad stranger who had nothing to do with me. I stood up from the bed. She looked up at me, her face a mixture of confusion and tears, a crumpled form now clutched in her hand. What are you doing?" she asked. I didn't answer. I turned around, walked out of the bedroom, and closed the door softly behind me. I went into the living room, sat on the couch, and picked up a magazine. I stared at the pages, not reading the words, just letting the quiet of the apartment settle over me. I could still hear her crying, but it sounded distant now, like it was coming from a different house, a different life. It had no more emotional effect on me than the sound of traffic outside. That night, the switch in my brain stayed off. I had crossed a threshold, and there was no going back. The next morning, I woke up, and the feeling of emptiness was still there. But it wasn't a bad feeling. It was clear. It was the absence of anxiety, the absence of walking on eggshells, the absence of the constant low-level stress of trying to please someone who could never be pleased. I was free. I got up, made myself a coffee, and got ready for work. Usually I'd make her a cup too, leaving it on the nightstand. I didn't. I went through my routine in silence. As I was about to leave, she came out of the bedroom, her eyes red and puffy. She looked at me, standing by the door, and there was an awkward silence. In the old days, this was when the goodbye kiss would happen. In the new days, this was when the form would be presented. Today, it was nothing. I just looked at her, gave a slight, polite nod, and said, "Have a good day." Then I walked out. I didn't try to touch her. I didn't ask for a form. I didn't engage with the system at all. I had simply opted out. The days that followed were strange. I continued to live in the apartment, but I was more like a ghost. I was polite. I was clean. I paid my half of the rent, but I was emotionally gone. I stopped initiating any kind of non-essential interaction. I didn't ask her about her day beyond a cursory, "How was it?" I didn't suggest we watch a movie together. I certainly didn't attempt any form of physical contact. The stack of consent forms on the coffee table began to gather a thin layer of dust. At first, I think she saw it as a victory. See? Her system worked. I was no longer a threat. I was no longer making unsolicited advances. She told her friends online that I had finally internalized the principles of enthusiastic consent. She seemed almost proud of my new, detached behavior. But then the first week passed, then the second. The silence in the apartment grew deeper, heavier. The lack of affection wasn't a respectful pause anymore. It was a gaping void. She started to realize that the system had a fatal flaw. It could grant permission for affection, but it couldn't create the desire for it. And my desire was completely, utterly gone. She started trying to prompt me. She would let out a big, dramatic sigh and say, "I'm feeling really stressed today. I could really use a hug." I'd look up from my book and reply, matter-of-factly, "Okay, the forms are on the table if you'd like to authorize one." My tone wasn't sarcastic or angry. It was perfectly neutral, like I was telling her where the remote control was. I was simply following her rules. She would just stare at me, flustered, and then mutter, "Never mind." she tried a new tactic. She started filling out the forms herself, signing her part, and then leaving them for me. One evening, I came home to find a form on my pillow. The box for cuddling was checked, with a specified duration of 15 minutes. It was signed and dated by her. I picked it up, read it, and placed it on my nightstand. Then I got into bed, on my side, and went to sleep. I didn't touch her. The next morning, she asked me why. "I saw the form," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "You didn't act on it." I turned to her, my face a blank canvas. "It was a consent form, Noemi," I said calmly. "It grants permission. It doesn't place an obligation. I simply didn't wish to engage. Thank you for the offer, though." The look on her face was a mixture of shock and dawning horror. She was being defeated by her own logic. She was getting a taste of what it felt like to have your desire for connection be subject to another person's detached approval. It was the ultimate role reversal. She was now the one seeking affection, and I was the impassive gatekeeper. The difference was, my gate was closed permanently. I spoke to Leaf about it that weekend. I laid out the whole story, the crying, the form, the switch that flipped in my head. He listened intently, a grim look on his face. "So, you're just ignoring her?" he asked. "No," I corrected him. "That's the beauty of it. I'm not ignoring her. I am complying with her system, 100% to the letter. Her system requires that all affection be initiated via a formal, documented request. Since I no longer have the desire to make such requests, I don't. And when she makes one, I treat it as what it is, an offer I have the right to refuse. I am being the perfect, most respectful partner according to her own rulebook." Leif was silent for a moment, and then he let out a low whistle. "That's brutal," he said. "It's malicious compliance on a whole other level." "It's not malicious," I replied honestly. "It's just compliance. The malice, the desire, the feelings, they're all gone. I'm just an automaton following a program, the program she wrote." He understood. He saw that this wasn't revenge. This was an outcome, the logical conclusion of her experiment. Back at the apartment, things continued to deteriorate. Her frustration grew daily. She started trying to pick fights, probably just to get some kind of emotional reaction from me. She'd criticize the way I loaded the dishwasher. She'd analyze a comment I made about the weather for problematic undertones. I would just listen, nod, and say, "I'll keep that in mind." No anger, no defense, just a calm gray wall of non-reaction. It was driving her insane. She couldn't understand how I could be so calm, so detached. She had spent months pathologizing every male emotion as some form of toxicity, and now that I was displaying no emotion at all, she didn't know what to do. She was like a matador in an empty ring. Her ideology had prepared her for a fight with a raging bull of toxic masculinity, but it had no answer for a man who simply put down his horns and started grazing peacefully in a corner. One night, she tried to get romantic. She put on some music, lit some candles, and came out of the bedroom wearing something nice. She sat next to me on the couch. I didn't react. I just kept reading my book. She cleared her throat. "It's a nice night," she said. "It is," I agreed, not looking up. She put her hand on my knee. I instinctively looked down at her hand, then up at her face, my expression neutral. I didn't flinch away. I just looked. That simple, questioning look was enough. She snatched her hand back as if my leg was electrified. She knew the unspoken question in my gaze. "Where's the form?" The atmosphere was thick with her failure. The candles flickered. The music played to an audience of one. The evening she had planned was a total bust. I wasn't playing hard to get. I wasn't punishing her. The simple, devastating truth was that I just didn't care. Her touch meant nothing to me anymore. It was just a physical sensation, like a fly landing on my arm. Her attempts to be seductive were like watching a nature documentary. Interesting from a detached, biological perspective, but it stirred nothing in me. She had successfully and surgically removed my attraction to her, and now she was baffled by the scar. The breaking point came about a month after my awakening. It was a quiet weeknight. I was at the kitchen table, paying some bills online. She was pacing around the living room like a caged animal. I could feel her staring at me, feel the waves of her frustration rolling off her. I just kept my focus on the screen, typing in numbers, balancing my budget. Finally, she couldn't take the silence anymore. She marched over to the table and slammed her hands down on it. "Look at me," she demanded. I slowly raised my head, my expression placid. "What is wrong with you?" she yelled, her voice cracking. "Why are you like this? Why are you so cold?" I took a slow breath. I knew this was it, the final confrontation. "I'm not cold, Nomi," I said, my voice even. "I am being exactly the man you trained me to be." "What are you talking about? I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask for you to treat me like a roommate." "Didn't you?" I asked gently. "You implemented a system where every single interaction had to be filtered through a lens of suspicion. You taught me that my natural instincts to show affection were predatory. You conditioned me to believe that my touch was a potential violation until proven otherwise by a signed document." I leaned back in my chair, my calmness a stark contrast to her rising hysteria. "You treated our relationship like a legal contract, and you treated me like the opposing counsel. You made me so self-conscious, so afraid of making a wrong move, that I learned to just not move at all. You successfully deprogrammed every bit of spontaneity and passion out of me." Tears were welling up in her eyes. "I was just trying to make things respectful. I was trying to build our relationship on a foundation of consent." "No," I said, and my voice was firm now, but still not angry. "You weren't. Consent was always there. We had it. It was in every shared glance, every easy touch, every comfortable silence. You didn't build a foundation of consent. You built a bureaucracy on top of a foundation of distrust. You started from the premise that I, by default, was a potential problem that needed to be managed with paperwork." I gestured around the quiet apartment. "This is the result. This silence, this distance. This is the perfectly safe and ethical relationship you designed. There are no unsolicited advances. There is no ambiguity. There is no passion. There is no love. There is only the protocol. Congratulations. You got what you wanted." She was openly crying now. "But I miss you," she whispered, a heartbreakingly genuine confession. "I miss us." "I know you do," I said, and for the first time I felt a flicker of something, a distant echo of pity. "You miss the benefits of a loving relationship, the warmth, the affection, the intimacy. But you weren't willing to accept the foundation it's built on, trust. You wanted the flowers, but you were terrified of the soil. You can't have one without the other." I stood up from the table. "You looked at me for months and saw a walking, talking embodiment of toxic masculinity, a set of theories, a problem to be solved. You never just saw me, Dean, the guy who loved you." I let that hang in the air for a moment. "And the thing is, I finally learned to see you the same way. You're not Nomi to me anymore. You're an ideology, a system, a set of rules. And I can respect your rules. I can follow your protocol, but I can't love it. I can't desire it. I can't feel anything for it at all." Her face crumbled. She finally, truly understood. She understood that her attempt to make our relationship perfect had destroyed it. She had conducted an experiment, and the conclusion was that her hypothesis was fatally flawed. "So what now?" she sobbed. "Now," I said, my voice soft but final. "I'm ending my compliance with the program." I went into the bedroom and pulled out a suitcase from the back of the closet. I started packing, methodically. Socks, shirts, pants. She followed me, standing in the doorway, just watching, a torrent of silent tears streaming down her face. She didn't try to stop me. She didn't argue. She knew it was over. As I packed my toiletries, I saw the little 3-ring binder she kept on her dresser, the one with the neatly printed label, Consent Archive, a complete documented history of the death of our love. I paused, picked it up, and felt the weight of it in my hands. All those signed pieces of paper, all those dead moments. I walked back into the living room and placed the binder on the coffee table, right next to the dusty, unused stack of blank forms. I looked at her one last time. "You were so busy documenting every interaction," I said, "that you forgot to have one worth remembering." And with that, I picked up my suitcase, walked to the door, and didn't look back. I stepped out into the night air. It was cool and clean. As I walked down the street, away from the apartment and the binder and the protocol, I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel angry. I just felt light, like a massive, invisible weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying had just been lifted off my shoulders. I was free. Free from the scrutiny, free from the paperwork, free from the constant draining performance. I wasn't a partner or a petitioner or a potential threat anymore. I was just Dean. And for the first time in a very, very long time, that felt like enough.